Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage. Lovely to see you on this Friday morning. I hope you're having a good week and looking forward to the weekend. I certainly am. May I remind you, we have lots of services at church this weekend. Tomorrow evening, 5:30 Saturday at St. Bart's Church, which is a service of Holy Communion. 8 o'clock Sunday morning, Holy Communion, Book of Common Prayer, peaceful, reflective, quiet. 10 o'clock Sunday morning, celebration, hoodie choir singing, and that's which will be live streamed from church as well. 10 o'clock Sunday morning at St. Bart's. At St. Anne's, 11:45 Sunday morning, service, lovely service from there, and of course there'll be an online service from there too, 11:45 Sunday morning, and 5:30 p.m. at St. Bart's, choral evensong in the evening, and we would love to see you. Anyway, you'd be very, very welcome. As you know, our doors are always open, physically and metaphorically, and they're open to you. So God bless you, and we'd love to see you over the weekend. So, to our reading for this morning. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this reading is, I think, one of the toughest and to understand and to do in the whole Bible. So this morning, I'm going to ask you to take your brains, turn them up to number 11. I'll give it my best shot. It's difficult to understand and difficult to do, but I'll give it my best shot. Here goes. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. So, listen carefully. I'll try and talk you through it. Now, who will harm you if you are eager to do good? But if you suffer for doing what's right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear, and do not be intimidated. But in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that's in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence. Keep your conscience clear, so when you are maligned, those who abuse you for your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame. For it's better to suffer for doing good, if suffering should be God's will, than to suffer for doing evil. For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in former times did not obey, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah, during the building of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were saved through water. A baptism which this prefigured now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who's gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God with angels, authorities and powers made subject to him. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right, okay. Fight your way out of that one, Vicar. I'll give it my best shot. It's hard. This I think, with technology, is very hard to do and hard to understand. But I'll try and talk you through it. Firstly, it stands to reason that if people live good, honest, straightforward lives, generally speaking, people like you for it, and you won't get into trouble. Generally speaking, if you're honest, if you stick to the laws of the land, the authorities will like you for it, and you won't get into trouble, and you won't get arrested, and all that stuff. Generally speaking. And that sort of stands to reason. So what he's saying here is, if you want to get on, if you want to live peaceful lives, then live honest and be good. Okay, job done. But that's not always the case. And sometimes people suffer even though they do right. And what Peter's saying here is to the people here is that there are people who will dislike you for your faith. There are those who will persecute you for it. And the people who he's talking to in Turkey clearly are having a hard time. They clearly are being persecuted for their faith. They are being falsely accused and so on. And this could be because people are jealous of their faith. Maybe they feel threatened by their faith. They might have other agendas. They might disagree or whatever it may be. People won't always like you for it. And some people will persecute. And clearly the people here are being given a hard time. They're being persecuted for their faith. And Peter kind of tells them what to do in response. And he tells them, do not be afraid as others are afraid. Now, this, I think, is the hard bit to do, because let's be honest, we are human, aren't we? And they were human just like we are. And actually, when you're having a hard time, if someone's persecuting you, it's quite hard not to be afraid, isn't it? But what Peter says here is do not be afraid. And firstly, he says, do not be afraid, because effectively what he's saying is, you've got a bigger boss than they have. That Jesus Christ is risen, he's exalted, sitting at the right hand of the Father, he's won the victory. So however big your problems are, remember, you have a God that's bigger. And however powerful the authorities may be who are against us at the time, for whatever it may reason, we have a God who's bigger and more powerful and stronger and more victorious, and he's called Jesus. So the first reason not to be afraid is because however big your problems are, remember we have a God who's bigger. And however difficult the problems may be, we've got a God in Jesus who's stronger. That's the first thing. We're on the winning team. Second thing he says, and he's inexorably positive here, he says, always be ready to give account of the faith that's in you. In other words, when people are giving you a hard time, sometimes they'll ask you about your faith. So always be ready to tell them why you're a Christian. And I think there's a message in here for us actually, is what would you say if somebody asked you why you're a Christian? What would you say if somebody asked you to give account for the faith that's in you? I think there's a point there. And I need to ask myself again, what's that about? What would I say if somebody asked me, why are you a Christian? Always be ready to give account of the hope that's in you. So turn the situation round into a positive. So firstly, don't be afraid because we've got a God who's bigger. Secondly, don't be afraid because sometimes you'll be given the opportunity to speak of your faith and actually might be able to turn it around to a positive because they might hear the message too. But thirdly, he says, let's not forget that Jesus suffered first. And he suffered for doing right as well. And he went to the cross and he died. And then we get to the tricky bit because he talks about he going down to the preach to the spirits in prison from the days of Noah when God was patient or something. Now, this thing, I've got to be honest with you, I don't understand it. I think it's a question of answers on a postcard for this one, I'm afraid. I don't really get it. I mean, it could be. It's often thought that but between his death and his resurrection, what was Jesus doing on that Saturday? That he was down in hell or the place of the dead or something, preaching to souls of prison, maybe giving them another chance or what it would be. Now, possible. I don't know if that's what the Bible says. It's a bit odd because if he was preaching to people, why does he call them spirits in prison? Like, there are complications in there too. But I want to give you another approach because I think Noah actually is very important to Peter. And we know this because in the second book of Peter, chapter 2, chapter 3, I forget which one, he also talks about Noah then. Because I think the analogy of Noah is very important to the people that Peter's talking to. Let's not forget that you all know the story of Noah and the ark and so on. That in the time of Noah, there were Noah and the other 7 members of his family, because he's three boys, all 3 was. There was a smaller, there were a minority in the people that they were there. That amongst all the people around them, they were righteous, but everybody else on there, it was a great time of great wickedness. So you've got a minority, and you're in a time of great wickedness. Thirdly, Noah and his family preached boldly, told people that to live righteously as well. They set a good example, and they told people to live right, to turn to God as well. Fourthly, they talked about judgment as well, and about the fact that God knows the difference between right and wrong, that there is such a thing as good as evil. And the people of Noah preached that at the time. But of course, in the end, God did save the people, and the water came. But the small number of people who had been righteous, they were saved. And I think the analogy Peter's making here to the people at the time is a bit like the Noah at the time of Noah, so similarly to the people he's talking to at the time. You are a small church. You are a small number of people amongst a great big majority. That you are also living in times of great wickedness, but you are a small minority who's living life righteously. That like the people, like Noah at the time, you are preaching boldly about your faith. That like the people of Noah at the time, judgment is coming. God does know the difference between right and wrong. And also, like the time of Noah, you, the small number, will be saved as well. And I think what he's doing here is using the analogy of the story of Noah as an object lesson to what it's like today. As it was for Noah then, they were saved. Similarly today, you will be saved too. And I think that's what he's saying here really, is that like Noah is prefiguring what the situation is now. So hang on in there, keep being righteous. God knows what he's doing. Keep preaching boldly and you will be saved. That's what he's saying, I think. Right, so in conclusion, very difficult passage, okay? But just to remind you, I'll try and sum it up very quickly. Firstly this, people that live good and righteous lives, generally speaking, tend to do all right with authorities. Job done, as you can see. But not always the case for all sorts of reasons. But remember, firstly, we have a God who's bigger than our problems. Secondly, always be ready to give account for the faith that's in you. Turn it around to positive. Thirdly, remember that Christ suffered. And also, use the story of Noah as an object lesson. Remember that as God saved Noah and his family through all those difficult times, so today God will save us in the situation. He would have saved the people then, Peter's talking to, and he's talked to us now. However difficult it may seem, however small we may think we are, we've got a God who's bigger, so keep on in there, and like the people of Noah, we will be saved. Hope that makes some sense. It's my best shot. Answers on the postcard, please. God bless you. Have a lovely day. I hope to see you over the weekend. If not, back for the next Bible talk